Why they can't replace the version of you they took for granted has very little to do with romance and almost everything to do with identity, memory, and the way certain connections imprint on the nervous system. When someone meets you in a period where you were open, emotionally available, present, and genuinely invested, they aren't just interacting with a person. They are interacting with a version of themselves that only existed in that relational space. The way they felt with you, the way their defenses softened or activated, the way they were mirrored, challenged, comforted, or understood, becomes embedded in their internal landscape. And when they leave, what they lose is not just access to you, but access to that internal state. This is why replacement doesn't work the way people imagine. New connections may provide novelty, distraction, validation, or temporary relief, but they do not recreate the same psychological conditions. Because you were not interchangeable. You were specific. Specific in timing, specific in attunement, specific in how you responded to who they were at that moment in their life. Being taken for granted doesn't mean you were invisible. It often means you were stable, familiar, predictable. And the mind has a way of underestimating what feels constant until it is gone. When someone takes you for granted, they assume your presence is not contingent, that it will remain available regardless of effort. That assumption allows them to disengage without fully processing loss. But the nervous system keeps score even when the mind avoids it. And once you are no longer there, the system begins searching for what regulated it before. This is where the confusion sets in. They may move on quickly. They may seem unaffected. They may even appear happier. But what they are often doing is chasing stimulation, not connection. Because connection requires comparison, and comparison reveals absence. You were not just a partner, you were a pattern, a rhythm, a way of being known. And those things cannot be copied at will. Another layer of this is memory consolidation. The human brain does not store emotional experiences as isolated events. It stores them as networks, sensations, associations, internal states. When someone was with you during a time of vulnerability, growth, or emotional intensity, those experiences become tightly linked to you as a symbol. Not consciously, but neurologically. Later connections may activate different circuits, but they don't activate the same ones. This is why people often say things like, "It's just not the same," even when the new person is objectively kind, attractive, or compatible. The difference is not about the other person. It's about the internal reference point that was created with you. And that reference point becomes more noticeable with time, not less, especially once the distractions wear off. Regret doesn't always arrive as sadness. Sometimes it arrives as restlessness, as dissatisfaction, as a sense that something is missing that can't be named. And the mind often resists identifying the source because doing so would require acknowledging loss and responsibility. Taking someone for granted involves a kind of emotional minimization, a belief that the connection was easily replaceable because it was comfortable. But comfort is not emptiness. Comfort is safety, and safety is rare. When they try to recreate what existed with you, they often focus on surface traits, similar interests, similar humor, similar dynamics. But what they can't replicate is the emotional history, the shared context, the way you knew them before they knew themselves in certain ways. That version of you existed in response to who they were then. And because they are not the same person anymore, Even if you were to return, it wouldn't be the same version of you either. This is another reason replacement fails. You were not a static experience. You were a relational process. And processes cannot be copied. They unfold over time through interaction, trust, and presence. There is also an ego component that complicates this further. Taking someone for granted often involves an unconscious belief that one is entitled to better, more, or different. That belief doesn't disappear just because the relationship ends. It follows them. And when new connections fail to provide the same depth or stability, it threatens the narrative they told themselves about leaving. It introduces doubt, and doubt is uncomfortable. So instead of integrating the lesson, they may continue searching, telling themselves the next person will be different. But the problem was never the people. It was the inability to value what was present while it was present. And that inability doesn't magically resolve without reflection.
This is why some people cycle through relationships without ever feeling satisfied. They are not looking for connection. They are looking for the feeling they had when someone cared in a way they didn't fully receive at the time. But that feeling was co-created. It required your presence, your patience, your emotional availability. And once those are gone, the conditions no longer exist. From your side, being taken for granted can distort your sense of value. It can make you wonder if what you offered was ordinary, if anyone could have done the same, if your absence even registered. But the truth is often the opposite. The more quietly you gave, the less dramatic the loss appeared at first. And quiet losses take longer to surface. They don't announce themselves. They emerge slowly, in moments of comparison, in emotional flatness, in the realization that something meaningful is no longer accessible. This does not mean you should wait for regret to appear. Their inability to replace what they lost does not obligate you to remain attached to the outcome. Healing does not require vindication. It requires self-recognition. Recognizing that what you offered had weight, even if it wasn't acknowledged in the moment. That you were not taken for granted because you were insignificant, but because your presence felt safe enough to overlook. And safety is often only understood in hindsight. When someone cannot replace the version of you they took for granted, it is not because you were perfect. It is because you were real. You met them where they were. You responded to who they actually were, not who they pretended to be. And that level of attunement leaves an imprint that novelty cannot erase. Over time, people may forget details, conversations, dates, specific moments, but they do not forget how they felt in a space where they didn't have to perform or defend. That feeling becomes a quiet reference point, one they may never fully articulate, but one that shapes their dissatisfaction with less meaningful connections. And this is where your power lies. Not in being irreplaceable to someone else, but in knowing that what you offered came from depth, not scarcity. You don't need to compete with anyone new. You don't need to be remembered in a specific way. The version of you that mattered existed because you were present, authentic, and emotionally available. And that version cannot be recreated by someone who did not share that history. When you internalize this, something shifts. You stop measuring your value by whether someone realizes what they lost. You stop waiting for recognition that may never come. And you begin anchoring your worth in the truth that you showed up fully, even when it wasn't reciprocated. That truth stays with you, and it becomes the foundation for future connections that don't require being taken for granted,
before being valued. Welcome to Attachment Alchemy Lab. You're safe here.